Welcome to another episode of the Waffle Shop podcast. Today I'm joined by a bit of a legend. He's an author, rugby player, psychotherapist, and again, an all-round legend, Alexis Caught. Welcome to the Waffle Shop.
Hey there. Thank you for having me. I'm not sure if I've earned legend yet. Maybe one day.
I know, I feel like I have to hype my guests up. like,
Well,
to
that's all
bring
very
them
kind.
in.
We can always do with a bit of hype up on a chilly, kind of gloomy morning.
Exactly. That's what we're here for. We're full of positive vibes, just to kind of get rid of the crap, basically, is what we're gonna go with that one. So obviously, thank you for your time today. But I start each one of my shows with something called the Weekly Waffle, which is something is quite minor, but once I get it off my chest, it makes me feel better in the hope that it doesn't snowball and then trigger the bigger things. But this has been really winding me up for quite a few years now, whereas this week in particular, it's got on my nerves. And I don't know if you might be able to kind of appreciate this, but it's
Okay, let's
ticket
see.
sellers.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I had the stress of trying to buy Beyonce tickets. 3 times it took me, 3 days, 3 mornings it took off me. Luckily, I got them. I have to now travel to Sunderland to go, but it'll be good. But the whole ticket buying process is so stressful and anxiety inducing and thrilling at the same time. But have you ever experienced that, like trying to get tickets?
Yeah, so I'm quite lucky that most of the music artists which I like or listen to, of the ones who are still alive and touring, are relatively niche. So actually, there's no chance of them selling out. So that's quite nice and relaxed. But the worst one I ever had was trying to get Kate Bush tickets when she did her
Yeah.
residency a few years ago. And because I have been a massive Kate Bush fan since I was genuinely tiny.
Yeah.
I can remember just seeing the video to Wuthering Heights appearing on Top of the Pops 2 on like remember the TVs are massive back in the day. That tells, and I was like about 4 or 5 and just being totally like, oh, who is this? What is this? And as we're on video, you can see behind me where I have a painting of Kate Bush. Because we're in an audio, no one else can see that. But yeah, everyone, I'm sat here talking about my love of Kate Bush while there's a big painting of Kate Bush behind me. And so when she did her tour, I was so excited to buy tickets because, and this tells you what a bit of a lame fan I am, I had been saving for years and I had a Kate Bush fund. I had a specific bank account, and you know that you can name savings accounts with different things, and some people do like rainy day fund, mortgage, boiler. Mine was Kate Bush fund. And just any spare leftover money I had at the end of the month, I would always just put away into this Kate Bush fund, because I dreamed that one day she was going to perform, and I didn't want the reason that I couldn't go to be money. So I've been saving for it for years, and I had an embarrassing amount of money in there, and I was just like, whatever it costs, get a ticket. And you have saved for this for about 5 years. So whatever is in there, you're allowed to spend. And then she announced her tour. I was like, I knew it. I knew this was going to happen. This is my day. I've got the money. We're fine. Doesn't matter how expensive the tickets are. And actually, these tickets were really reasonable price. They were only 70 quid, which considering the demand,
that's cheap nowadays.
Exactly. Considering how much some people charge, I think it's utterly ludicrous, but that's a whole other thing. I think that pop stars are having us on there. I think people are some absolute mugs. Anyway, but not Kate Bush. She wouldn't do that to us. Never. And so then the dates when the ticket sales were going to go on sale were announced, and my stomach plummeted because that was the day that I was due to be in Marrakesh. And I took my mum to Marrakesh for Mother's Day. And so I was there in Marrakesh on the terrible Wi-Fi in the place that we were staying, panicking, trying to buy these tickets, and I just frantically did it. But actually, you know what? The old gods smiled on me, and they knew, don't worry, you're an actual fan, and they blessed me. So I didn't pay attention to where the tickets were. Just hit best available, pay, details in.
Go for it.
Had memorized my card number so I could put it in straight away. And then it was only when I got the confirmation email, and then did I start breathing again and looked at the seat and was like, row A. Like, oh my God, I'm sat right at
No.
the front. It was amazing. Best night of my life.
Do you know what? This was such a roller coaster. I was like, please get those tickets.
I know,
I was so
exactly.
invested in that. That is quite the passion then in your voice was. But
This-
did it pay off? Was it? I imagine it was an
oh
incredible
my
night.
God. When I die, like genuinely, I'm gonna be fine with it because it means I get to watch the Kate Bush tour again as my life flashes before my eyes. Something to look
I
forward
feel
to
like
at the
genuinely
end.
hand on heart, no pressure, but this is like this has been the best start to one of my episodes I think I've ever had.
There we
That is
go.
brilliant. Oh, I think I've never heard of a Kate Bush fund. I feel like, but it sounds so severe at the same time.
Well, I like to plan, and I
Oh,
wasn't going to miss out.
well, it paid off. So if
That
anything,
it did.
consistency is key with this. Ah, well, to be fair, I feel like I'm on a bit of a high now. Is there anything kind of that gets on your nerves that you'd like to get off your chest today?
Oh, I'm not sure we've got time for everything that gets on my nerves. I think my favorite. It doesn't really bother me because there's just so much of it, and if I did engage with it, it would bother me. So I have to like breathe out, let it go. I love people slagging off social media while they're on social media. And I love that.
Oh wow.
And like, Twitter's such a toxic place, they tweeted. It's like okay, have you thought about not being on there? Or when people like Love Island, oh, it's so unawful, it's terrible what it's doing. Like, you tried not watching it? No,
Just
because then
don't
I
look
won't
at
have
it.
anything to. I'm like, okay, cool, own it, own it.
Again, absolutely brilliant. I've never thought about it from that point of view because you kind of then like, yeah, I agree with you. Twitter's so toxic whilst I'm reading the tweet,
What?
retweeting
Yeah,
the
and
toxicity. Yeah.
exactly, and it's just utterly odd, and it makes me giggle.
That is brilliant. To be fair, this is off to a solid start. I mean,
Yeah, thanks.
yeah.
Solid start. So I'm getting like a 6, 7 out of 10.
So far, so far.
Okay, cool.
You're already surpassed Sean Paul, he left the episode on with a 3.
Sorry,
So
to use his correct name, Sean Paul. You
Sean
can't.
Paul, sorry.
Yeah, exactly. We grew up in the 90s. You can't just call him Sean Paul.
He hates me. The amount of puns I throw at him. And to be fair,
Oh,
Sophie
wow.
expects that she will never talk to me again. The amount of murder on the dance floor puns I throw at her,
I
like,
I
hates me.
think that, well, to be fair, I think that Sophie Ellis-Bextor is kind of like, doesn't hate us, but she's kind of like, I'm not sure she's alive. I think she's a spirit, which if ever more than 30 gay men appear in a room, Sophie Ellis-Bextor appears with a PA system, be like, I hear there's been a murder on the dance floor. Absolutely adore that woman. What an amazing
Her
way to
PR
spin.
team must be so busy.
I don't even think it's the PR
Constantly.
team. I think it's her, and I absolutely love her for it. Like, I admire people who work hard, and she works hard. Love
Love
it.
it. Fair play to her. But my face is hurting already from like smiling laughing. I want like, obviously we're here to have a waffle about like your journey and the incredible work you do. I kind of want to rewind a little bit before we kind of get to what it's led to and talk about like your journey because you're very open when it comes to like whether it's mental health, whether it's your sexuality. Kind of, I mean, this is pretty much of an open-ended question, but like, when did that start? When you started realizing, like, oh, mental health is a thing?
Oh, when
I mean, it's always been a thing, but
yeah, yeah. So I I come from a family where I was very much aware of mental health and its
yeah,
impact from a young age. And it's always a difficult one to talk about while also wanting to respect people's privacies.
yeah,
Um, so someone in my family who well, well, actually, he talks about it quite openly. So, but my dad has mental health issues and
Yeah.
struggled, and so that's actually played a very large role in my teens.
Okay.
And I struggled with my own issues in my teens, and then also unfortunately lost another very close family member to suicide. We've had alcoholism and some drug issues in the family as
Yeah.
well. So I've always very much been alive to it and the impact, both from feeling it myself,
Yeah.
and then also seeing the impact on others and having to look after and care for people with ongoing struggles.
Which is tough. Like when you know, because I imagine, I mean, I kind of don't want to put words into your mouth, but there's certain elements there that I really relate to, like with my own journey, and it becomes very difficult to talk about how you're feeling because you almost
Mm,
feel kind of selfish in a way
mm,
because it's like,
mm-hmm,
well, I'm not going through what that person's going through,
mm,
so I can't talk about what I'm going through because it's kind of, it might be minor to them, but obviously
yeah,
everyone, regardless of how major or minor it is, you know, your feelings are very, very valid.
yeah. And when comparative emotion shaming was
Yeah.
what, as a psychotherapist, that's what I
Well, that's a good
refer
way of
to it
putting
as,
it.
where
That's
we
a
where
lot better
we
than what I just said.
compare when we compare ourselves and how we're feeling to, oh, but that person's got it so much worse, and then we shame and judge ourselves. That's when we do it internally, and then this, again, predominantly social media driven whataboutism,
Yeah.
where actually no matter what someone's going through, well, actually, what about them? Because they've got it so much worse. What about me? What about this? Why
Yeah.
haven't you thought about that? It's like, actually doesn't matter. There's there's a psychotherapeutic term and concept called phenomenology. And it's actually all about refocusing people just on their experience, how
Yeah.
they perceive something, because we all perceive things in entirely different ways. Do you remember the dress from all those years
From
ago?
the,
Was
is
it
it
blue and
blue
white?
or
Was it
gold?
black and
Yeah.
grey or whatever? So that was a really good, clear example of phenomenology. Some people saw it one color and that was their world, and other people saw it another color. Then there were also other camps who saw it in totally different ways.
Yeah.
Actually, it doesn't matter what color it technically is because you experience it as something. And we
Yeah.
have to give ourselves that permission. If it actually, it doesn't matter if someone else has got it worse off. It doesn't matter if this is a quote unquote minor thing because you experience it. And it's
Yeah.
how you experience it that tells us the impact on you. And if we shame ourselves for having that experience, my God, we're shaming ourselves for being human.
I think a lot of people, to fair, myself included, needed to hear that because I mean, I say it quite a lot on the show about like the comparison being the thief of joy, but it's
Absolutely.
also from that perspective, it's very much like, well, I should not be comparing someone else's journey to mine, like whether
Mm-hmm.
good, bad, like what in between it is,
Mm.
because
Because
we're all on our own
comparison,
path.
yeah, absolutely. Comparison is the thief of joy, but comparison can also be the thief of compassion.
That's powerful. That's good. Oh my God, you're on fire already.
Gunning for
Just
that
wanted
eight.
it. Yeah. You're on the way. With obviously what those kind of experiences that you've kind of mentioned, how did you navigate that? Because obviously everyone knows how hard being a teenager is.
Mm,
Like just being a teenager is difficult, but then you throw so many
mm,
different themes, journeys, like you know
mm,
the conversation around like sexuality, like it's all these things that kind of make it very, very difficult. So you throw like a mental health, you know,
mm.
anything like on top of that. How did you navigate that?
At the time, up until my late 20s, with very unhelpful, unhealthy coping mechanisms. um,
I love the
but
manic laugh after that. That really sold it to me.
um, well, you know that meme about the person being on the house and the fire and be like, everything's fine. That was very much me. And I don't judge my old self for doing that because it allowed me to get through. So was I particularly in touch with my feelings? No. Um, was I particularly compassionate to myself or to others? No. Was I doing particularly healthy things? Also, no. Could I have actually gone a different path at that time and gone a healthier route? Also, no, because I was still going through things. Like, and you can't take the roof off and change the foundations of your house in the winter when it's
Yeah.
tipping it down and when it's snowing. You've got to wait for good weather to do structural work on your house. And I had to wait for good weather to do the structural work on my house. And so at the time, it was just in teens, it was kind of shutting off from emotions. In my early 20s, it was throwing myself into work and trying to achieve social markers, which would, okay, maybe if I get that, maybe if I buy that, maybe if I do that, maybe if I get that promotion, maybe if I look like that, maybe if I go there and do that, maybe then I will feel something. Which in a capitalist consumerist society, actually, we don't want people to reflect and be at peace with themselves. We want people to buy solutions.
Yep.
And I was fully in that. And because that is what our society set us up for. And I broke.
Yeah.
I broke. None of the coping mechanisms were working anymore. And I broke and I was in really brilliant therapy for 3 years.
Amazing.
Really, really, really deconstructing myself, dealing with things. And I'd been in therapy in the past, but I liken that more to, I got an interior designer in and we painted the walls and it was good. It made living in the space a bit more comfortable for that time.
Yeah.
But actually, my house was built with dodgy foundations and it was sinking. And so the therapist I went to for 3 years helped me deal with the fact that my house was sinking.
Yeah, this isn't going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And eventually, yeah, it's good. And I'm not saying that now everything's perfect. I've had, so as a professional therapist, we have to have therapy, not just because of our own stuff, but also because secondhand trauma is real. If we're taking, I've had 2 sessions this week because I knew I needed more. It's like, yep, this is a 2 session kind of week this week. And I also even booked myself in an extra professional supervision, which is where all therapists, we've got supervisors where we take our patient caseload to basically a slightly older therapist who then takes that all to a slightly older and an older and an older. And eventually you find this one grand high psychotherapist who's like 1,000 years old. And I had to take things
because I can
to
actually
them.
imagine it.
Yeah. And I had a lot of stuff to take this week, but I knew what was going on because now I've got that level of self-awareness. So I was like, hang on a minute. I know what's going on for me now. Because as a mental health professional, I think a lot of people think, well, that means you're absolutely fine, A+ for you, and you never have any issues. And like, no. That would mean that we weren't human. Because to be human is to have these issues. If anybody spends their entire life only feeling joy and only feeling happy, that's actually called mania, and there's a certain medication we need to give you for that. Being human is feeling all of the different ranges of emotion, the different strengths, but they pass, and rather than any of them one dominating. And I had a wonderful, wonderful, joyous weekend, and then a couple of things hit me, and I needed to work on them and talk about them. And that's how I'm able to be here laughing today, because I talked about them, I processed it.
But you know, it's a very powerful position to be in. And, you know, I'm yourself, like me, like there's people probably listen to this podcast thinking or having those feelings of like, oh, I'm not going to be able to do this. This is going wrong. This is going wrong. When all it kind of takes is that moment of kind of, well, that moment to stop, to be like, something's not quite right here. But the
Mm,
fact that instead of kind of letting it be and let it simmer, you challenged
mm-hmm,
it. And then it's like, okay, it's like a whole new world opens up
mm,
of like
mm-hmm.
whether it's possibilities and even, to be fair, happiness kind of is achievable by challenging those negative feelings, the
Yeah.
thoughts, like it all. So I think, yeah, and I'm a big like
Mm.
advocate for people needing therapy without those traumatic, big, massive, life changing events.
Absolutely. But also, if you were to take your keys and you were to sit on them now, it would feel really uncomfortable. But
Yeah,
then your brain would stop registering that discomfort and you'd still be sat on your keys. And actually, mental health can be a bit like that. We can feel it. We can feel really down. We can feel stressed. We can feel anxious. We can feel worried, depressed, any negative emotion. But actually, we can become so used to it that actually we forget that we're sat on the keys and we
yeah,
shouldn't. Yeah, we shouldn't be sat on the keys.
that's
And
brilliant.
yeah, and so we just if I were in charge, everybody, just as you should go for a physical checkup once a year, everybody would just go for a little, what I call a checkup from the neck up,
Yeah.
just to go and sit with a professional and be like, how am I? And kind of like just wobble things a bit and just check. And so, best case scenario, you walk out there and be like, cool, I just spent an hour, I'm fine, I'm grand, carry on. Or be like, oh, hang on a minute, actually, I was sat in some keys.
Yeah. Do you think there's an element of fear there for people? Because obviously, for
Oh,
a huge
yes.
period of time, I was like, something's not wrong, but like, I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to deal with it until it got to a point
Mm,
where I had to deal with it because I didn't know what was going
mm,
to happen next. If there is someone listening to this who has that fear, like, what would,
yeah.
like, in your professional opinion, what would you advise them to do to get past that?
What's worse, living in fear and limiting yourself from living, or actually like, right, okay, there's this monster outside my door. I'm trapped in my bedroom right now. I've got to either live here in this one room, or I can open the door, I can face what's out there, deal with it, and actually live outside. That's what I'd say. Like, is how you are now, is that really all life is? And actually, do you know what? I'm going to do. We can. Are you up for doing a little exercise,
I mean,
which we
physical
can?
exercise.
No, 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 no,
I was going
no.
to say,
Like
my
no,
sports
a
bar's in the
little.
wash. So,
Not a bit of not a physical exercise. No,
okay.
a psychotherapeutic exercise.
Okay.
Do you have a pen and paper to hand by any chance?
I do.
Okay, grab one. And if you are listening along at home, now is your chance to also grab a piece of paper and a pen. That's all you need. It can be any color. Piece of paper can be any size.
Ready.
And sometimes I do this with my patients when they're talking about things and they're in that bit of a situation where they're just a bit stuck. So draw a straight line along the piece of paper, just a straight line across the piece of paper.
Okay.
Left side, write birth.
Okay.
Right side at the very end, write death. Where along that line do you think you are? And just mark it with an X.
Oh, I actually stopped breathing then. That was to
Mm,
breathe.
yeah,
Um, okay. Yeah.
yeah. So actually, when we look at it, we're saying, no matter where you are on that line, it's actually a good reminder that, hang on a minute, if we imagine that we mark that X and we say we're in the first third of our life, like, my God, we've got 2/3 of our life left to go.
Yeah.
We've got time to deal with this. Let's take our time, work on this now, and get on with it. We're at 50%, around there. Right. Okay. So we're now coming to the second half of our life. How do we want to set this half of our life back up? Let's reflect on everything we went through and actually set ourselves up to really make the most of that second half. If we're somewhere in that final third, my God, what are you wasting time for? Come on.
Yeah.
You don't have time to live in regrets. That's why we need to make change. That's why we need to do the work of therapy, no matter where we are on that line, because otherwise we can just lose our consciousness of life and the days can just slip by us. And then suddenly we realize we've not actually lived. We've just existed and kind of drifted. And my God, we should all really live life.
Yes. That is, well, you took my breath away. Like, you can probably see, if I watch this back, like my breath is like, that is incredibly powerful. And I think it's a huge eye-opener as the fact that, yeah, no regrets. Like you don't want to get to the end of that line and be like, I should have done this, I could have done that if I did this. Like, I think, from what you're saying, we're in a lot more control of our own lives than what we think we are. We've just got to kind of push past that limiting belief and fear.
And be really conscious in our life and the choices we're making, the actions we're taking.
Which again, you're a 9. You're at a 9 already. You're at 9. Okay.
Okay, right. Better not swap over and muck it up now.
No, honestly, it is brilliant. But kind of to steer the conversation back to you a little bit. Okay. Well, not a little bit, a lot. That's why you're here. But with this kind of work that you're doing now, and obviously the books and stuff, like, was there a moment when you were going through like I mean, obviously I know the struggles don't necessarily stop, but you get more self-aware, like as you've said. Is there a moment where you've kind of like, did you expect it to go the way it has now, being in the position where you're actually helping so many people come to terms with this kind of stuff?
Did I expect it? No. It's a very difficult one because I don't logically, and even here we all have to fight our cultures and our upbringings, and I have to fight my Irish background of like, if you say that you're helping people and you're saving loads of people, check the notions on you now. So that's an odd one. That's something I have to process and work through. How do I answer that? That stumped me a bit. I never anticipated taking this path in life. When I was younger, I considered going into psychotherapy and psychology and wondered what to do. And my mum gave me a great bit of advice, which was, nobody wants a 21-year-old therapist. Which actually sounds harsh, but also kind of fair. So I went away and I worked in my 20s in a totally different field. And then I retrained in 2019 and been in the NHS the past couple of years. And I've learned that actually it's the reason why I was driven to write, for example, and do talks is because there is real power of working one-on-one with people.
Yeah.
But as we're all aware, unfortunately, mental health waiting lists are just spiraling. Now, if I could change that, I would. And in my own way, by not voting Conservative, I do try and implement better mental care for everybody. By trying to talk about these things in my social life, by encouraging people to have conversations, I try and affect it that way. But also, that's 1 hour I can spend with one person. If actually we help other people and give them tools, or speak on podcasts, or speak at festivals, or talk on stages, or write books, then actually we can be helping at a bigger level. And I'm not doing that work. I'm giving some people some tools, or asking some questions, or asking them to draw a line on a piece of paper and just consider. And that's actually how we can then get some scale going about this, because we all need support. And in particular, writing Queer Up, that was funny because it came about because, so I'm a volunteer and an ambassador for a crisis line called Shout. It's Shout 85258.
Yes.
Yeah. So I've been with them since they launched in 2019. In fact, actually, it was one of the first on the line. And it was brilliant. But there was this point where I recognized that I needed a quite specific resource for mental health and identity support for young, curious, questioning LGBTQ plus teenagers. I did some research and I couldn't find anything that was appropriate. And I asked our clinical supervisor, I was like, do you know anything that I could give them, that anywhere we can point them to answer some of these questions? And she came back to me and was like, no, I've not found anything either. So I was like, oh God, someone needs to write this book, don't they? She went, well, you write, on you go.
Your job. You do.
Yes, it was. And so it was very much, so writing Queer Up was a joint process of writing the book which I needed when I was 13 or 14 and had all these big, scary, existential questions about who am I, how do I feel, and where do I fit in the world? Which, when heterosexual people have those questions, it's called a midlife crisis. But for those of us who are LGBTQ+, we have to have that when we're 12, 13, 14, and we're dealing with acne, or we're dealing with schools and exams, and our hormones going wild. So it's particularly unfair. Why don't we just get a sports car? But fortunately, no one gives sports cars to 14-year-olds. Anyway, instead, hopefully we're giving 14-year-olds actual support and encouraging them to think about how they feel, that validation, that love, that unconditional love and support, which is so powerful. And being able to provide that is a wonderful, nourishing feeling.
Yeah. You must feel proud, like, with that.
Yeah, I feel very genuinely emotional when I think about it, or some of the letters from people, the conversations I've had with people, like at book festivals or at Queer Up reading events. It's just been amazing.
What I find more incredible, and I think people overlook this so much, like, it's just talking. You're sharing knowledge, like your experience, like something that is so simple, like the impact it has is phenomenal. It obviously, I know it's easier said than done to talk, but you look at, I mean, we're both now in this kind of position, like from the impact of talking, sharing experiences, life has somewhat got better. So I can't shout about it enough when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Well, it's all about connection. Human beings, we are inherently social creatures who have a need for connectedness.
Yeah.
And at no point in humans' existence have we been as isolated and cut off as we are now.
Yeah.
The numbers of people living by themselves are higher than they've ever been. Now, I live by myself. Living by yourself can be great, but I think that says quite a bit.
Yeah.
Actually, even though we are connected via social media, actually, the amount of real FaceTime, not digital FaceTime, which people get, lower. Community halls are empty. Grassroots sports and things are petering out. Kids aren't playing out in the streets in the same ways. Our grandparents no longer live with us in the family home. They get mistreated in care homes owned by Tory donors. We have become incredibly connected, and I do firmly believe that, unfortunately, this has We are now dealing with the sickness which was caused back in the 80s when Margaret Thatcher said there is no such thing as society. Society, connectedness, humanity is what has kept us together for thousands of years.
I don't understand.
And we've
stuff
seen
like
an
that.
erosion of that over the last 40 years, very deliberately. And people have made huge profits off that, but actually it's making us sick.
That's powerful. And it's a real kind of like, again, not like keep like stopping to breathe. That seems to be happening quite a lot in this episode. I'm actually fine, but like the stuff that you're saying is though so thought provoking. I'm thinking like, well, actually, yeah, change does need to happen.
Mm. And there are lots of different schools of thought within psychotherapy. I subscribe to a few in particular, and I've done specialist training in a few: existential psychotherapy, where we look at those big drivers in life of life and death, and we have to deal with those, we have to look at those, we have to face them, but also the systemic and liberation psychology and psychotherapy, which means that actually you are not the issue here. Maybe the issue here is the system.
Yeah.
And if we look at the numbers of people who are breaking, maybe actually it's the system that is the problem.
Yeah.
You know that phrase, in a mad world, the sanest seem the maddest. Oh my God, I think the world is absolutely ludicrous. It's on fire. It's flooding. Climate change is threatening our very existence. We have billionaires who are speeding that up by flying to the moon. We have famous people who take 14-minute flights, like dumping the same amount of carbon as some small countries do in 14 minutes. And jobs aren't there. People's living standards are plummeting. People are physically unwell. Like, no one has got any money. Not even sure if we've got any energy. We don't even know we've got food. We've got record numbers of people using food. So society is not working for us.
Yeah.
And if we place all that blame on the individual and we say, stiff up a lip, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Or my favorite one, which a lot of corporates do, is you need to be more resilient.
Yeah.
Actually,
at some point, of that though.
Yeah, at some point we need to be more like the French, and we need to riot, and we need to address the system,
here we go.
the problem in the system, and it's really serious, because actually there's only so much that anybody can take, and I think collectively, out of all of us, the piss has been taken.
Yeah,
and we're all suffering the consequences of it now.
It's a rubber band, isn't it? Like, you feel like it's going to keep stretching and stretching and stretching, but at some point it's going to snap.
It either snaps or it breaks. And I think the powers that be are counting on the rubber band breaking.
Oh, God. This is a powerful episode. You're brilliant. It's 9.5 now. So this is the last little bit now, just to get you to that 10.
Okay.
So with all this, obviously I talk about coping mechanisms quite a lot on the show, because, but to be fair, it is one of my coping mechanisms, having this connection and these kind of conversations, which obviously I know, like, you write, you play rugby, there's a lot that you kind of like, you occupy your time with. Like, what else do you kind of lean upon when things do kind of get a little bit much? Like, how do you kind of stop?
So I'm very fortunate that while it looks like I do many things, all of those things provide me respite from the other.
Yeah.
So I enjoy writing because actually it gives me really good reflective time, and it feels nice and creative. And I don't even write on a laptop. I write on Post-its and stick those Post-its up on my wall and thread it together.
I just drew my line on a Post-it.
Yeah, because it's really physical and it's a different experience. I play rugby, and before anyone looks at us like, who's this professional rugby player that I've never heard of? Like, no, mate, I play quite a comfortable amateur level now these days because I am in my mid-30s. I used to play more competitively. Now it's a really enjoyable kickabout with my mates.
Yeah.
It's routine and its structure, which we all need. Even as much as we might want to push against routine and structure, we actually need it.
Need
It's
it.
good for our psychology. And it's a wonderful hit of endorphins. It's great exercise. And above all, it's connectedness.
Yeah.
It's a really great community, which, as I said before, on society is actually eroding the bonds of community between us. So they're there. It's shown that, and not to sound vomit-inducingly worthy, but it's proven that helping others actually makes us feel better. So I volunteer with a couple of different organizations. A couple of weeks ago, I just got back from a charity that we've been volunteering with for 8 years, where we take young people between the ages of 12 and 19 with additional and special needs. We take them on different trips throughout the year. It's for respite care, and then every January we take them on a ski trip. We teach them to ski for a week. It is absolutely hilarious. Yes. It's great fun, and it's physically exhausting, but it's the most affirming and rewarding and wonderful experience. So I volunteer. Again, it's about connection. It's about stepping outside of yourself, doing something, helping others helps yourself. Then in my own time, I really take time to be connected to my happy inner child. I love laughing. It sounds really basic, but I really think we should laugh easily in life. I think there's a lot to be said for being silly. My friends nickname me the Mischief Goblin, because I'm always up for a bit of mischief. I'm always up for just wiggling something and having a bit of a laugh. I think we all need to be in touch with our Mischief Goblin a bit.
It's the simplest things, though, isn't it? That it has the biggest impact.
Absolutely. And I'm quite lucky in that my tastes are not fancy. I don't need particularly high-end things. I'm so chuffed on like every few weeks when I go to Kirkstone Market in Leeds and there's a brilliant sweet shop there, and I buy myself a bag of pick and mix. Oh, it keeps me happy for ages. In the couple of days, thinking ahead of it, thinking about what am I going to have, which ones am I going to do, and then just eking those sweets out. Oh, I love it. Little things like that, and laughing, music which makes me feel good, books which makes me feel good. Also, I don't worry about highbrow or lowbrow culture consumption. You know, when people are like, "Oh, what's your guilty pleasure?"
Can't do that. Yeah,
I don't have guilty pleasures. I've got pleasures. And so for example, it's thoroughly problematic, but for a whole number of reasons, which honestly, I don't care about. I really enjoy The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. It's a load of nonsense. It's pretty to look at, and they cry into their diamonds at the end of the day. So it's fine for me to kind of have a bit of a giggle at it. It's brilliant. It's popcorn for the mind. And then also, I will say this because as well as like a therapist, I am training. I'm doing specialist training at the moment in clinical psychosexual therapy. I also try and have a good sex life as well, because sex life's a really powerful, transformative, wonderful thing. Both solo sex by ourselves and also with 2 or more persons invited in as well, because that's a whole other spice of life, which we should all like indulge in those flavors as well.
Well, it's variety, isn't it? Variety, as they say, is the spice of life. I love that. Yep. 10. Well done.
There we go.
There. So you've mentioned a few things there, especially like with music. People come on here and they say about like guilty pleasures and stuff. And when you say it, like, well, that's actually like my top played song of the year. So
exactly. And then we're implying that we shouldn't be into it, and we're shaming ourselves, we're shaming everyone else. Like, if you enjoy it, enjoy it. I had enough of that pressure in my teens. I mean, again, now that I'm in my 30s, I've got no time for that. Come on.
So, speaking of music, I always have 3 final questions that I ask each and every one of my guests that comes on for a waffle. The first one being, which I can't imagine with you being quite a positive person that you are, like getting on the dance floor. Does there need to be a song playing? And if so, what song would that be? Or are you kind of someone phone rings and you're dancing?
A song which is guaranteed to make me dance, that when I need energy, I will put on myself and dance to it in my house. I've even danced to it in clinic in between patients in my little therapy room before. Is Dolly Parton's Baby I'm Burning. It's
Oh my God. Yes.
such a great song. Listeners, if you don't know it, please just
Yes.
stop listening to my nonsense and go and listen to Dolly Parton Baby I'm Burning. It's so uplifting, it's so life affirming, just energetic, and it
I love.
just
Do you do the
really
gun?
puts me
Do you
back.
do the gun?
Of
Yeah.
course I do.
You
The little
do.
lady
Of
noise.
course you do.
Of course you do. You've got to.
I love that. That was brilliant. Okay, on the flip side of that, is there a song? Obviously, you're very in touch with like your emotions now. Like you're very open when it comes to like expressing them and exploring them. Is there a song or even an album that
Mm.
pulls that emotion out of you or makes you cry and pretend you're in a music video when you look out the window?
Oh, I'll pretend I'm in a music video anytime I'm given. There are my two most emotional songs. I'm going to go for two because you
Yeah,
can.
you've earned it. You're a 10.
Thanks. I pulled myself back from a third. One is Kate Bush, Under the Ivy. It's a really simple, very short song. It's only 2 minutes, 17 seconds. And it's just, yeah, oh yeah, I know it that well. I
Wow.
know the exact time. And it's just her singing by herself with this really simple piano arrangement, but it's haunting, it's beautiful, and it's really, really gorgeous. Yeah. Go and listen to that, people.
Yeah, I was gonna say, yeah.
Kate Bush, Under the Ivy. Yeah. And I think because you can either be singing it to someone else or you can be singing it to remind yourself.
I love that music does this.
Yes. And then the second song which puts me in my feels is Sarah officially by Fleetwood Mac, but it's actually Stevie Nicks one.
Yes.
And if you can, find the longer versions of it. They're out there on the internet. And it's a gorgeous song, which is multi-layered, as many of Stevie Nicks' songs are, because she's a poet first and foremost. And so it's not like modern music where it's very literal and what they're singing about are the words. With her music and Kate Bush's music and David Bowie's music, it's poetic, and you really have to read into it and think of analogy and what they may be talking about, which also I think allows you more room for interpretation, for you to really feel yourself in the music. And there are just some amazing lines. And I mean, I could do this entire episode just about The Power of Sarah by Fleetwood Mac, but there are some amazing lines in there, which were, one, for example, is just a really small backline in the chorus, which is there's a heartbeat and it never really died. Now, we know, because I'm a Stevie Nicks super fan, she was actually singing that about a number one child of hers.
Wow.
I sing that for two reasons. One, about lost love, because actually I firmly believe that everyone I've ever loved, the place in my heart is forever. So actually the heartbeat which I once had for them has never died. And it's also the song I mentioned earlier that I lost someone to suicide. It's my sister Sarah. Not Sarah. Sorry, she's not got. I can't believe I just said Sarah. It's Laura. She and I really loved that song together. And for me, that's she's part of the heartbeat that never really died, because she lives in me when we hear that song together, and it's a wonderful way of keeping our memory and that connection together. And there are so many wonderful things throughout it, including in the shorter version, she just sings in this fade out, all I ever wanted, and then just fades out. It's like, maybe, do we ever really know what we want? I don't know.
But then if you listen, then
yeah. And then if we listen to the longer version, it's all I ever wanted was to know what you were dreaming. And which I think is beautiful again, is it's also got the immortal lines of drowning in a sea of love, which I think is, it's such a wonderful thing where I've been there before where love can feel really overwhelming, and
Yeah.
it's a wonderful, powerful emotion. But also, sometimes if you don't know how to take love and you don't know how to receive love, it can be overwhelming, and we can drown in it, and we can lose ourselves in it. It's a
You're
phenomenal,
brilliant.
phenomenal
This is,
song.
I've got, I feel like I've got a whole playlist of songs for this. Too bad. One final question, and a lot of people
Yeah.
find this one quite uncomfortable. But if
Hmm.
there was a song that you were just going to pop in a box and never listen to it again, is there a
Is
song?
now, is that because we don't like it?
Multiple, it could be anything. I mean, it could be overplayed. Like I'm just not a big fan of
Okay,
it.
great.
Like,
This Girl Is on Fire. Absolutely hate that song.
yeah. Okay.
Really dislike it. It's shrill, it's overplayed. It's also really not that good. So that is in the bin.
Wow, beautiful. This has been an absolute belter of an episode. Like I've took so much away from this, even just having the conversation. So I'm excited for it to be out there and for people to listen to it. But you're incredible, and I genuinely wish, and I'm not saying this to kind of make you feel uncomfortable or anything. Like I had kind of like your voice when I was like growing up and kind of the dark times and stuff like that, just to know that there is tools out there, it is okay to talk. And for that, like I really want to thank you for, because now I'm also in my 30s, but like knowing that I'm on the kind of the right path by kind of exploring and like sharing and this kind of stuff, like it's okay to do those things, when for such a huge part of my life I felt like it was the wrong thing to do. So thank you so much for that.
You're very welcome. And I hope that you thank yourself for doing that for others as well, with what you're doing in the podcast, because it will be having the same effect.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for joining me for a waffle.
Thanks for having me. Tasty waffle.